The engines start one by one in the half-light of an English morning, a sound that rolls across wet grass and dispersal tracks like distant thunder. Men pull on gloves, stiff with cold and oil, step up into aircraft they know intimately, and strap themselves into positions they may never leave again. There is no speech that marks the moment. The ritual itself is the warning. Checklists are read. Maps are folded. Bomb bay doors are tested and closed. Above all of it hangs a shared understanding that this flight may not return. When the B-17s lift off and begin to climb, they do so with the calm precision of habit, carrying crews into a day that will ask everything of them. American daylight bombing over Europe rested on an uncompromising premise: fly high, fly together, and strike with accuracy. From the first climb to operational altitude, the B-17 Flying Fortress embodied that doctrine. Its design emphasized range, stability, and defensive firepower, but doctrine demanded exposure. The aircraft had to fly straight and level over the target so bombs could be released accurately. That requirement placed crews in a corridor of danger measured in minutes but paid for in lives. Preparation began hours before wheels left the ground. Ground crews fueled and armed the aircraft, loaded general-purpose bombs, and checked systems already strained by previous missions. Air crews attended briefings where routes, weather, enemy defenses, and alternates were laid out. The target name appeared on a map: Hamburg, a port city whose docks, shipyards, and industrial districts fed the German war effort. Numbers followed the name, expected opposition, predicted losses. No one needed to explain them. Survival was never assumed. The climb to altitude was slow and deliberate. At height, the air thinned and the cold deepened. Oxygen masks were donned. The formation assembled in broad patterns, each aircraft adjusting position to maintain spacing and mutual cover. Below, England's fields slid away into ordered shapes. Then the coast passed beneath the wings and the North Sea followed, a flat grey expanse offering no comfort except the distance it placed between the bombers and immediate danger. As the formation pressed on, the view changed again. Rivers traced pale lines through darker land. Rail yards and canals appeared as rigid geometry. Cities resolved into grids broken by smoke from industry and earlier raids. From altitude, Hamburg emerged clearly, its harbour basin, warehouse districts, and industrial belts standing out against surrounding neighbourhoods. The clarity was deceptive. This was where the defences were thickest, layered by design and waiting. Inside the aircraft, each man settled deeper into routine. Gunners scanned sectors, eyes tracking cloud edges and sun glare. The navigator confirmed headings against landmarks now familiar from photographs and memory. The bombardier prepared the site, aligning altitude and airspeed, aware that once the bomb run began, the aircraft would be committed. Conversation was minimal, limited to short calls and confirmations over intercom hum. The crews were young, many in their early 20s, trained to respond without hesitation. They trusted procedures because there was no alternative. Anxiety surfaced only in small acts, rechecking a heater connection, adjusting a mask seal, flexing fingers stiff with cold. The aircraft felt alive, vibrating through the fuselage, control cables humming under tension. Every man knew that when the target appeared beneath the nose, there would be no room for doubt. Approach to the target imposed the most rigid discipline. Bomb bay doors opened, changing the aircraft's drag and sound. The bombardier took control through the bomb site, locking the aircraft into a steady path. For those minutes, evasive movement was restricted. The formation held course, presenting a predictable profile to the defenses below. Those defenses were not random guns firing blindly into the sky. Around Hamburg, heavy anti-aircraft batteries were organized into belts. Large caliber guns stood in fixed emplacements, supported by crews who worked as teams. Radar units tracked incoming formations at long range, feeding data to fire control centers where operators calculated altitude, speed, and course. Predictors translated that information into firing solutions. Fuses were set before shells were chambered, timed to explode at a precise point in space where bombers would pass seconds later. When flak fired, it did not aim to hit an aircraft directly. It aimed to fill the sky around it. Each shell burst into a violent cloud of steel fragments, expanding outward at lethal speed. A near miss was often enough. Shrapnel could slice through aluminum skin as if it were paper, sever control cables, puncture oxygen lines, rupture fuel tanks, and wound crew without warning. The sky became a three-dimensional minefield, invisible until it detonated. German fighter units added another layer of danger. Fighters could wait for damaged aircraft straggling from formation, attacking from angles that exploited blind spots. Even the possibility of fighters forced crews to divide attention at the worst possible moment, when concentration needed to be absolute. The hit came without warning. A sharp crack reverberated through the fuselage, followed by a violent jolt that threw men against straps and bulkheads. The aircraft lurched as fragments tore through its structure. Inside, lights flickered. The smell of cordite and burning insulation flooded the narrow spaces. A gunner shouted "damage." Another reported an engine losing power. The intercom filled with clipped voices as training replaced instinct. This was why flak was feared. There was no attacker to see, no line of fire to return. The violence came from everywhere at once. A burst that did not strike the aircraft directly could still kill, turning the interior into a storm of metal and pressure. Systems failed simultaneously. Oxygen hissed where a line had been cut. A control cable snapped, changing the feel of the yoke in the pilot's hands. The pilot countered the yaw as the damaged engine windmilled. The co-pilot adjusted mixture and propeller settings, keeping eyes on failing gauges. The engineer isolated a fuel line to prevent fire. Gunners stayed on their weapons, scanning for fighters drawn to the wounded bomber. The navigator recalculated the route home, factoring reduced speed and altitude. Each action was deliberate, drilled into muscle memory long before this moment arrived. A pair of enemy fighters appeared briefly at distance, probing the formation's edge. Defensive fire forced them to break away, but the threat lingered. The damaged B-17 held position as best it could, conserving what control remained, flying on restraint as much as power. As the formation moved away from Hamburg, the flak thinned. Engines were rebalanced, oxygen systems were checked again. A wounded crewman was tended to in the cramped space available. Improvised bandages pressed against blood darkened by oil and grime. The aircraft's interior bore the marks of the hit: jagged holes, torn insulation, spent casings rolling along the floor with every vibration. Below, the city receded, its harbor and factories shrinking back into patterns. Crossing the coast again brought a cautious easing of tension, but no celebration. Empty positions in the formation told their own story. Aircraft that had been there on the approach were gone now, absorbed into cloud or sea or fire. Landing was the final test. With reduced power and compromised systems, pilots brought aircraft in carefully, sometimes without flaps or full brakes. Ground crews waited, ready for fire or injury. When wheels finally stopped rolling, the mission ended not with triumph, but with relief. The aircraft would be counted, crews accounted for, losses recorded. The B-17 Flying Fortress earned its name not because it was invulnerable, but because it endured. It carried crews into environments where exposure was required, not risked, and returned enough of them, often enough, to sustain a campaign built on persistence. Flak made that persistence costly, transforming airspace into an engineered killing zone that punished predictability and rewarded survival with little margin. The cold truth of the air war was never hidden from the men who flew it. They prepared each morning knowing preparation might be all they would ever have. Over cities like Hamburg, amid bursting steel and contrails, the Flying Fortress became a vessel of resolve. It did not promise survival. It offered a chance.